Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special Valentine's Day PACT episode. Can everybody hear me, see me? Perfect, awesome. I'm going to turn it over in just a few minutes to our lovely Michelle Knapp, who's hosting this evening. As always, it's such a pleasure and a treasure to see your little boxes. It's so good to see you. We hope you guys are staying happy and healthy and enjoying the end of winter and gearing up for what we all hope to be a generous springtime. Before beginning tonight, the House would like to take a few minutes to reflect on a recent loss in our community. As many of you know by now, Sarah Ritter passed away last week from complications of pneumonia. And from what we understand, this was a very sudden departure. Sarah was a fellow Buddhist and a poet, and she was someone that I could always trust to find the kindest way forward. Sarah was incredibly generous with her energy and her time and her spirit and her understanding of other human beings. Sarah and I got into the habit of taking walks around the PACT campus during our summer residencies after particularly long workshop sessions, and it was just we got the chance to workshop 3 out of my 4, I guess, semesters together, and she was such a wise friend to me. And she had this amazing ability to listen to me all the way through, even no matter how harebrained or, Midwestern my schemes were. She could hear me all the way through. She didn't make it a habit of cutting people off. She really wanted to hear people out and see their ideas all the way through and understand them before having any kind of input. Sarah had this rare talent for listening in order to understand, not in order to respond. And this is what made Sarah singular in my mind. She lived this Buddhist life of curiosity, truly. Sarah was so open-hearted. She was able to see past these petty mortal judgments that we make every day, and she was able to make sense of this internal conflict taking place within each person on earth. And she was committed to a righteous and loving path in life. And I was so lucky to know her, and we all were. And I hope that we're all able to harbor the extreme tenderness of her poetry in our hearts. It's very difficult to speak in the past tense about Sarah, and I know that Sarah's faith and Sarah's heart make it easy to believe that we'll meet her again. So we'd like to invite you now for a brief moment of silence as we reflect and honor Sarah's rare and beautiful and singular life. Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle now. Welcome to PACT.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. Welcome. In the spirit of Sarah Ritter's curiosity, we will have a lovely evening together, I believe, and conversation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle Knapp. I am a fiction alum of the Pacific University MFA in Writing program, librarian, reader, and writer. I am thrilled to be hosting tonight as we bring together another ensemble of skilled and dedicated writers engaged in thoughtful conversation about craft. You can also find us on Substack. We at PACT are a collective of friends and writers. Together with our Substack, PACT Desk Set, PACT aims to deepen conversations centered around our fellow alums' publications, as well as the friendships, artistic partnerships, and community we experienced during our time in the MFA. And this evening we have 2 interviews for you. Kicking us off is Therese Beal. Therese writes creative nonfiction with a nod to her journalistic roots. She is a graduate of Pacific University's MFA program and has been published in Talking Writing and the Dead Mule School of Southern Literature. When she's not at her desk, Therese can be found enjoying the beauty of the Pacific Northwest, rambling in her camping caravan with her husband, or hanging with her 2 adult sons in Seattle. Therese, take it away.
Thanks, Michelle. And it's a true delight to be here. And thank you, Kate, for those tender words about Sarah. She was a dear friend. I am delighted to be joined tonight by Nancy Miller Gomez. I'm a huge fan, like a fangirl of Nancy's work. We met actually, of course, through the MFA when she was our MC at the residency a year or two ago. You probably will never forget her humorous ChatGPT introductions of our speakers. But Nancy also made it to my little town here on the shores of Lake Washington near Seattle during her poetry. She doesn't call it a tour, but it was meeting with communities of poets up and down the coast after the publication of Inconsolable Objects. So a little bit more about Nancy. She is the author of Inconsolable Objects, published just in 2024 by Yes Yes Books, and also published Punishment, which is a Rattle chapbook series book. Her work has appeared in Best American Poetry, Best New Poets, Prairie Schooner, Lit Hub, The Adroit Journal, New Ohio Review, The Rumpus, Rattle, Verse Daily, and elsewhere. She received a special mention in the 2023 Pushcart Prize Anthology. Nancy co-founded an organization that provides writing workshops to incarcerated women and men and has taught poetry in prisons, jails, and the juvenile hall. She lives with her family in Northern California, where she serves, and this is new, as the Poet Laureate of Santa Cruz County. Congratulations again, Nancy.
Thank you.
So, Nancy, let's talk about your writing. As I said, I was drawn to it immediately because I was, way back when, a newspaper reporter, and your poetry is very narrative. And you've talked about how stories are really inspiring all of your work. So we're going to talk a little bit about 4 of your poems and some of the inspiration that came into those. But I thought what we should do is start with the first one. The first, and if you want to hold up the book, I think you've got the book with you. Inconsolable Objects. So the first poem is called Snapshot. Would you mind reading that for us?
I would love to. And I just want to say it's an honor to be here. Thank you guys for having me. What a wonderful group of alum. I'm so delighted to spend time with you. I'm going to be hanging out with you all in the future. Now that I know of you, you won't get rid of me. And thank you for that lovely introduction, Therese. And Kate, I want to say thank you for that beautiful tribute. Sarah's loss is devastating. She just was a magnanimously warm, giving human being. And I know we all feel her loss immensely, many more than others, and I didn't know her that well, but even in just the brief period of time I spent with her, she was just lovely. We should all aspire to be more like her, is what I would say. And so thank you for sharing that beautiful tribute. This is the first poem in my collection, Inconsolable Objects. And actually, I'm going to share with you a picture because this is based on a photograph. This is not only kind of origin story, but also it's based on this picture. I don't know if you can see that, but I had given myself a haircut. I absolutely hated to wear dresses. And it was picture day. So my mom tried to make me presentable by forcing me into that horrible dress. Anyway, snapshot. I was a hand grenade of a girl, vacuum packed into a dress that bound my body like a bandage, staunching a wound. My arms were cinched in tourniquets of tulle, my throat choked in a rage of lace. I'd hacked my hair into chaos, kept it ragged and short, kept my fists clenched in the fuselage of my lap. My eyes, 2 foxholes. No light escaped. My lips stretched across my face like a tripwire. The man with the camera said, "You can do better. Give me a smile." I set my mouth into the look I've kept all these years. That's still me in the photo, waiting to pull the pin.
Thank you, Nancy. I'm glad you showed us the photo. And so I'm wondering, this photo, did it stir those memories, or what kind of creative imagining has gone into the lines there to shape that poem?
Well, the poem was very definitely inspired by the photograph. I still have it in a frame. I don't know if you can see up there. Here, I'll bring it down. Excuse me, a little show and tell. I still have it, like, in a frame. And it's one of those photos that every time I used to look at it, I'd be like, what the fuck? I was a really angry little girl, wasn't I? But I wasn't. I just, A, didn't like having to wear a dress, and B, I did not like being told to smile, because when I was younger, I didn't know how to smile unless I felt it. I didn't know how to force a smile. I didn't know how to fake a smile. And so I would I would try to shape my mouth into this, what I thought was a smile, but it really would just come across. It looked like a grimace. And my real, I'm one of those people that wears all my emotions on my face. So you could really tell that I wasn't smiling even when I was trying to smile. And that photo really embodies that. And it hasn't changed much. As an adult, I have learned how to fake a smile, but not very well. You can usually tell if I'm not really smiling. So it was just one of those poems that when you're looking around for material to write about, that photograph staring me in the face.
Okay. So is it an inconsolable object?
It is definitely an inconsolable object.
So I understand that you've traveled, that you've taken a collection of inconsolable objects with you to help inspire readings. And I'm just curious if you have some of those with you, and what kind of reaction you got from those things.
So yes, when I do readings for inconsolable objects, I travel with, and the idea actually came to me like the day before my book launch, when I had a million things I was supposed to be doing. Instead, I went to junk stores, and I found an old dollhouse that I bought for like $14. And actually, Laura, you got to experience this because I brought it with me.
Yes.
When I read at the Sacramento Poetry Center. Anyway, I set up this dollhouse and I filled it with inconsolable things, which I give away. I let people take them. And it's great because I have to keep restocking the inconsolable house. But some of the inconsolable things, and here I have some show and tell here. This guy he's very inconsolable. I'm really attracted to objects that hold stories. I know they scare other people, but to me, they're just really interesting. It's like, what's this guy's history? I met him at a flea market, and I could not leave him behind. So I brought him home with me. And now he has become part of the traveling art installation of inconsolable objects. She goes with me everywhere I go. I love her. Her eyes go sideways. And this doesn't really show you the inconsolable, doesn't really show you the house of inconsolable objects, which is filled with a lot of little things. These are more my personal inconsolable objects. I like her.
So the objects themselves obviously can inspire some terrors or memories. But also your poetry is also usually,
Yeah,
um,
this is an album by Anita Bryant, Greatest Hits, very inconsolable. And this is the secret of happiness. You know, you want to know the secret of happiness from these two people, right? Because they definitely have it. And one last sharing. I found this in a junk store. It's a photograph of an autopsy. Okay, I'm done.
well, that's actually a good segue to this. I want you to read it. I think some of the stories you're telling in your poems seem to be stirred by memories and also by objects. So with that in mind, why don't you read Coach Whip for us?
So a lot of the poems because this is my first full-length collection, so a lot of the poems are poems of origin, origin stories from my childhood. And I grew up in Kansas, so many of them are based in Kansas. And this is one of those. Coach Whip. It was the winter the snake went missing. We searched through laundry hampers, peered into toilets, stepped everywhere carefully. No one slept well. On the eve of the 8th day, my mother turned on the garbage disposal and heard the gargle of blades grinding through bones and flesh. Later, she fished out the mangled creature with an oven mitt and laid it down outside on a bed of snow-capped compost. All that year, I dreamed of knives sleeping beneath me. Mornings, I woke to the memory of the beautiful black coils, the diamond-braided skin in ribbons. And because I was a child plagued by imagination, I waited for them to rise up from the drain, silent as shadows, the kitchen brimming with generations of snakes draped over the chairs and light fixtures, a river of lacerated bodies slithering out of the sink, while the largest serpent slipped off, tasting the air with his tongue, sidewinding down the hall in search of my mother.
This could have been just a story, but it's really shaped into a poem. And I think what you've done is brought it into kind of plagued by your imagination. So I'm curious how else your imagination works. And I also really enjoyed some of the poems that used epics. So you've chosen some quirky bit of news, and that's inspired you to write more or to wonder what's really going on between the lines in the story. So I was wondering if you could share another one of those with us.
So I'll just read it. It's called Lost. And as she mentioned, I have been writing to, I used to be in the past, an avid reader of news stories. I haven't read the news for several months now. In fact, I avoid the news. I still subscribe to the New York Times, but I go straight to the cooking section because it's the only place that I feel safe and feel like I won't encounter something that will ruin my day. So, but back in the day when I used to peruse the news, I would find stories or epigraphs that I could respond to as a way of getting out of myself, because everybody gets sick of writing about themselves, right? And this is a poem that is based on a series I was doing using those quotes from news stories or headlines from news stories as epigraphs for launching a poem. And this is called Lost. A boy who was lost in the woods said a bear kept him company. No one can prove it didn't happen. CNN. The bear felt the boy before she heard him, sensed a disturbance deep in the knotweed, and knew something was scared there. At first, it unnerved her, but its cub-like crying drew her closer till a shift of wind brought the unnatural smell she'd learned to fear. She hesitated, sniffed again. This was different, not so manlike or musky. It was nuanced with sugar and sour milk. She was cubless that winter and drawn toward the hurt animal, not with a hunger, but an ache. The orphan had curled up like a pup nose to knees, whimpering. She padded in, snuffing softly, singing a lullaby of grunts and chuffs. The child turned toward her musty breath, reached his numb fingers out for her coarse coat. She curled in her claws and lay down slowly, settled herself so she wouldn't crush him, made her body into a cradle and tucked him into her. He dozed. She stayed that night and the next as the temperature dropped below freezing. He told her his stories, purple crayons, night kitchens, magic pebbles. She clicked her tongue and hummed about meltwater and spring. When she heard the far-off calls growing closer, she licked the fringe of blonde fur on his forehead, nudged him awake, and left. Back in the fold of his family, they noticed his unwavering gaze, the way he hesitated in doorways, grazing the air with his face, scenting the room, as if always searching for something he'd lost.
I love that. So we talked about this and the idea of allowing your imagination to go in the direction of the point of view of the bear. That,
Right.
you know, we can take a news report, we could take anything in life and flip it and take a poetic sensibility to what could just be a mundane news story. Can you think of any others that you've done that are your favorites? And we'll just ask people to find them in your collection, but I'm just curious what your favorite is.
Well, the things that inspire poems for me are usually the quirky things, the things that stand out, that like make me stop and think, how could that be? So that quote about, the story was about this little boy. He's lost in the woods. He's 3 years old and he was out there in the cold for days. And when they found him, he was in pretty good condition. And his response was, well, yeah, because a bear took care of me. And, who knows if that's true or not? So this, it's always wonderful when you have a discovery in a poem. For me, that discovery was writing it from the bear's perspective, which I didn't expect to do. I was kind of like dancing around, how do I get into this and tell this story? And that's how the story went. Another one that I really loved was I came across an article in the BBC about a monk who had been meditating in the woods, and he'd gone further than he was supposed to. And he was meditating for days, and he was eaten by a leopard. And the headline was "Meditating Monk" or "Leopard Eats Meditating Monk." And I just, it's like I carried that around with me for days before I wrote the poem, but it was so startling to me because I I I just wanted to like understand what happens in this world when things like that go on. It's like I wanted to believe, and I choose to believe that it wasn't a violent thing, that it was an act of beauty, that it was a thing of joy for both the monk and the leopard. That's how I chose to write the poem. Another example is an article on women getting bombarded by dick pics in public places from strangers. And it's like, that's so offensive. And in that case, I wrote the poem from the perspective of the man who was sending the dick pic, because it's like, I'm just trying to understand where this person is coming from. And imagining the scenario where things do not go according to his plan. I don't know about any of the other women on this call or men, but if you were to get an unexpected dick pic, my guess is you wouldn't be overjoyed and shout like, "Yay! I've got a dick pic. I'm going to take it home and then, frame it." But anyway, so it's things like that sort of trigger my poetic mind. And And I do love writing. I used to love writing to the news because it gets me out of my own stories. It gets me out of myself. It gets me thinking about the world that we live in and our common humanity. And sadly, now I don't
Right.
news anymore. So unless I'm about a recipe on the New York Times cooking section, I'm probably done. I'm done. I'm done writing about this.
Okay. That's
Maria
great.
and Nancy, could I jump in for just a second? We've got
Yes.
about 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
So if you want to wrap up, and then we might have time for a question or two.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Well, there was only one other thing I was going to mention is that I know, Nancy, you mentioned some interest in writing lyric essays recently and talking to, really the fact that we can cross genres fluidly and bring, poetic language into essays and what is a lyric essay and just really playing across borders, so to speak.
Well,
So any advice for the rest of us?
I just think that poetry and creative nonfiction are so closely aligned. I mean, they're really, to me, they're one and the same, right?
Mhm.
Because we're all trying to get at that unanswerable, ineffable sense of what it is to be a human trying to navigate through this difficult world. And I think
Yeah.
both lyrical essays and poetry are doing that work in very similar ways. And so yeah, I have been working on a whole series of lyric essays. I haven't yet put many of them out into the world, only a handful of them, because I have less confidence around them. And self-doubt is my it's my chronic state. Like I bathe in it daily. And it's a wonder I get anything published at all, notwithstanding that. But yeah. I don't think I answered your question.
Oh, no, that's fine. I know we played around with that question a little bit. But it sounds like a great new opportunity. And also there's some comfort in knowing that you also struggle with self-doubt, because if you do, then we're all in good shape.
We're all in good shape.
We're all in good shape.
That's why I want to sit at the table with the poets and
That's right.
writers because, yeah.
Well, I want to see if anyone has any questions. I know we're running a little late on time. Does anyone have any questions for Nancy?
It's probably because I ramble so much.
No.
No, we're good. We have time for a question or two. So, Laura.
So this is really a follow-up on something that I observed when I had the honor of reading with Nancy in Sacramento, that the inconsolable objects were not just a prop, that they actually, at least on that particular evening, people there would grab an object, take it up to open mic, wave it around, and there was one object that evening, a doll, that became kind of a through line. And I am wondering, Nancy, if you can talk a little more about how this fascinating thing that you take with yourself from place to place, how people have responded, what they've done with it in some of your readings.
Well, thank you, Laura, for that question. It's one of those things where the first time I presented with these inconsolable objects at a rating, there was just so much enthusiasm from people wanting to engage with the objects and choosing the one that spoke to them that they wanted to take home with them, that I thought, wow, this is a thing. It's not just a gimmick. It's actually part of who I am and part of what my poetry is about, because I am really drawn to things that hold stories. And, we're all storytellers, but what is it that sparks a story? And, things like, this dude here, right? He has a history. He wasn't always so scary. And, once upon a time, he probably was part of somebody's shtick and traveled with, I don't know, or maybe he was just a kid's toy. I don't know his story, but when I saw him, he spoke to me because he clearly has stories. And I'm a bit of a junker. I know that's weird, but I love collecting things that speak to my heart, um, and sharing them with people and finding the stories in them. And, it can be anything from, I love to walk on the beach in Santa Cruz, and I find these things, I call them story rocks. They're these gorgeous, like, I don't know, fossilized rocks that are inscribed with what almost looks like calligraphy. And I love that every single one of them is unique. And I collect them and I give them away to people. In fact, I put them out at my readings and let people take them home with them because it's my little gift. It's like, fine, we can't be poets and writers unless we're observing the world, unless we're paying attention to the world, right? That's our first order of business, is to pay attention to the world, to look around and see what we notice and what captures your attention, what grabs you. And that's why I love to give these things away, because it's like, there's a story in that rock, there's a story in that object, and maybe it speaks to you and maybe it's your turn to write it. And we all just have to open up our eyes and notice each other and notice the things around us, because that's the material that we're going to write from and write to. And it's what connects us and makes us human. And yeah, I'm rambling.
No, thank you so much. Not rambling at all.
That was great. Well, Nancy, it's been a pleasure and truly inspiring. So I think we'll all be looking around and paying attention to objects that can trigger the next piece of work on our own.
Thank you so much.
So it's fun.
It's my honor to spend this time with you and all of you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Therese and Nancy. For our second interview, it is my pleasure to introduce Kate Wiley. Kate graduated from Pacific University in 2023 and currently holds the Guinness World Record for the world's largest collection of half-used Hello Kitty lip glosses. You can find Kate at her website, which we'll drop in the chat. Please give it up for Kate.
Thanks, Michelle. Definitely true. Definitely real. And I'm so excited, you guys. Oh, we're gonna yap. Allisa Cherry is the author of An Exodus of Sparks, Michigan State University Press, and the 2024 recipient of the Wheelbarrow Books Poetry Prize. Raised in a religious community in the irradiated high desert of rural Arizona, she has deep ancestral ties to Mormon history. And while not a direct descendant of Brigham Young, two of her aunts were plural married to him, and she is the great-granddaughter of a polygamist on her mother's side, which makes her Mormon royal adjacent. After her first religious deconstruction, she relocated to Portland, Oregon, where she works in workforce development teaching classes and workshops designed for immigrants and refugees transitioning to a life in the United States. In addition to her writing, she serves as an associate poetry editor for West Trade Review. Her work has appeared in Tri-Quarterly, the McNeese Review, the Penn Review, the Journal, and other literary journals. She's also the coolest person ever. I'm so excited to talk to her. Allisa, oh my gosh. We talked the other day and we just went and went. And I can't wait for her to read some of these poems to you. And just talk about like elegy and the book and like how you put it together and this whole thing. Do you want to start, like, do you want to read one of the poems first, or do you want to talk like a little bit, or I mean, how do you want to start? Like,
yeah, well, I guess I could just give like a little overview, which is that I guess because we kind of talked a little bit about how I started the whole book with the sonic crown around the exhumation of Moses and the reinterment in the Apache County high desert of Arizona, and how that was sort of going to be this trajectory of like this exploration of the deconstruction of my faith, and the relationship with my family throughout that deconstruction. But the book itself is kind of like a braided elegy, so I'm exploring both my the loss of my father, the loss of my brother, and the loss of my family's faith in this desert. And it's sort of like what this desert, which I really love where I was raised. I love the geography of where I was raised, and I love the high desert. And yeah, I really do. But I lost a lot of things in that desert, so it's kind of, tied up to that. So I was raised in a religious household, in a religious community. The entire town was it was bifurcated between Catholic and Mormon. And so a lot of the iconography and symbolism throughout the book is Mormon symbolism, which I was trying to get in there, like people would be familiar with it. So the first poem that I'll read is from that series, and it's called The 13th Article of Faith, which we had to memorize as children. It was 13 articles that Joseph Smith wrote that we were supposed to follow. And so there's some quotes from that, but I also make a reference to Bono and The Edge from U2, very important band, got me into sinful rock and roll. And this poem is called The 13th Article of Faith. The bishop said, "Think on these things," but we didn't know if he meant chastity or virtue, benevolence or faith, all nouns that might be used by a cosmetic company for different shades of glass. We thought, imagine only ever kissing one mouth for the rest of your life. He said, follow the admonitions of Paul. And we heard Bono singing 40, the Edge's voice entering high in the octave. We wanted each subsequent year to be a new mouth opening toward us, filled with longing and praise. The unfashionable tie knotted at the bishop's throat made us think of a tether, how he'd lashed himself to his woman like a raft on a swollen river. His eyes did not brighten before the shine on our mouths. He was steadfast. He belonged in the company of ranchers. He had one desire. He meant to drive us like cattle toward God.
Ugh. And it's like the diction that you choose for that poem is just so, like, the way you say you had to memorize, that scripture as kids, and then you're writing this poem as an adult, and you see so much of that diction being repurposed, like, and not, I don't think on purpose, but it's so deeply ingrained in, adults who were raised in a church, that I think it's like, it's so beautiful, and it's so it just has these, beautiful faith ringing sounds, that, like, they're so powerful, the sounds that you evoke in those poems. But yeah, that's why I wanted you to start with reading one of these poems, because I think it's so important that everybody has this thing in their head, like, this is the mode that you're using. It's a storytelling mode, but it's also this very, like, landscaped, painted, like, beautiful, lush, effervescent, like, world that you've built in this kind of rural high desert place. But it's like everything is so hyperbolized by memory almost, and it's gorgeous. Like, it's just so beautiful. So okay, keep going.
Okay. So this next poem, and I'm kind of grateful to Nancy because she showed an autopsy, and this ties into this poem. So yeah, because it was rural and lawless, somehow we ended up in a biology class in high school. The county attorney made an arrangement for us to go to an autopsy, which was insane. We got to go and dissect a human body as high school students, and we were the only school or class that got to do that because we were so unruly on the trip that nobody got to do it after us. But this is a poem that comes from that story, and it sort of alludes to or foreshadows my father's passing later. And this poem is called The Cold That Settles Lifts. That poor cadaver resting in the dissection lab might be in her 60s, but the skin over her ribs, peeled neatly back, looks like a young cormorant ascending from a salt marsh. In order to really see her face, haloed by lank hair shot with silver, eyelids as thin as onion skin, I have to drown out the brutal chatter of other biology students circling the table. And when I palm her liver, passed to me like a sacrament tray, I find its weight contains waning glory. We are young, some of us just beginning to fall in love, our hopes pinioned by that withered red knot slick with glycerin. Some of us think we're ready to see her dead body, but when the sheets are pulled clear, the backward hush of revelation is like holding a nest of fledglings in our mouths, so that years later, when I lay my hand upon my father's still breast, fingers unfolding across his burial whites, I will think I hear the babble of many voices or a murmuration of starlings lifting in flight. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Uh,
there's a lot of like rural America has a lot of kind of accepted like quotidian violence that is just inherent in the day-to-day existence.
it's true.
They're just sort of
Can
like
confirm. Yeah.
and and it's not I didn't I don't think I banked on that, or I don't think I cottoned onto it until I moved into a city, and then I would tell stories, and then like people would just be, I would think they were funny. I would just be telling stories about my family, and then people would just be dead silent, and I'd be like, no,
Yeah.
that's hilarious. That's hilarious. What you know? So yeah, so I think that thread of violence and kind of is woven through this
Y-
book a little bit, and making
Yeah,
things about
definitely. You
violence.
you have this, the whole book is a braid, right? It's a braid of different things, not just violence, but of family and of faith and of the deconstruction of faith, but also the understanding of how faith, which is it's an old system, right? It doesn't, we live in a post-faith world, right? As we've discussed. How does that system, or how does that, the belief system still work, or how does it fit into this kind of world? And it's interesting to see like the speakers in your poems kind of grapple with that, along with like the death of the dad, like there, and then the loss of the town and the loss of the, these moments that there's just so much in this book that's like, it's really wild to see you kind of deal with all of this stuff. And there are so many gears that, some of them are bigger gears, but a lot of them are just smaller gears that you see placed very strategically throughout the book to kind of keep things moving. Um, and and one of them was that poem that we talked about with the the litany of things, and you were like, I debated whether or not I was going to keep that one in because I wasn't sure, if that was really necessary in the book. And I was like, it's such an intricate small gear, but it moves things along so well.
Mm,
Um,
okay.
so in that spirit, I think, do you want to read or talk about maybe some of the sonnets and then maybe read a couple more?
Yeah, so the sonnets are a little, I tried to do a sonnet crown. It's funny that you talk about gears because I feel like I dropped a lot of balls with this book, and I think everybody feels like that with their first book. like I wanted to do a lot of things, and then also I was really tired.
Hey, nobody knows that better than I do,
I
my
was like,
friends. Like,
I was finally
nobody.
like, oh my God, fuck off. Like I was just like,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
done. I want to write a second book. This is exhausting. I tried to do too many things. And so I definitely feel like, and maybe this is just, we should all just cut ourselves some slack. Maybe it's okay to do just 3 things, but I can definitely see the loose threads of things that I was trying to do. And yeah, And if I'd been smarter, or if I could have found a smarter person to write this book, it would have been so good. Because I was going to do things on appropriation and land management, and I have met people that smart. Like, I hang out with people that smart, but I'm going to be grateful for what I was able to pull off.
But we can't do it all, right?
But
I mean,
listen,
that's a huge thing. Like, that's an important point to make,
I
right? Like,
know.
you
I'm
can't be
53.
expected
I'm
to
so
do
tired all
everything.
the time.
You can't. And even if you
Right.
could, like, a book can only take on so many things at a
I
time, right?
know.
You
I
can't
know.
write a book about everything in the world. Like, you can't. So I know,
It's
like,
only this big, you guys. It's only this big. It's so tiny.
we can't solve. I mean, we can only solve so many things with,
But I mean,
90
I've heard
pages,
Melissa
right?
McKistory read one poem.
And she
One
solved
poem
world
that does that
hunger.
kind of shit.
I
mean, you're
know.
like, how'd she get all that in one freaking
It's
poem?
terrible, right? I know.
It's
We go
horrible.
to school with some real geniuses,
I
and it
know.
really is, comparison is the thief of joy. I mean, that's true.
I
That's
know.
just
You're
true.
right. You're right.
Now, but I
But-
don't want you to, don't
Okay.
diminish this book. It's
Look, I'm not.
genius.
I mean, it's
Okay.
a good book. You guys, you should buy it. It's totally a good book.
It's a
But
great book.
I did get a sonnet crown in here.
Let's get back to the issue at hand.
And it has 6 sonnets, and it works, and it has full-on voltas and everything, and that was not easy. And the sonnet crown is like, it's like the exhumation of the body of Moses and the reinterment of the body of Moses, and it totally works. And Moses is doing a lot of work in this book. Like, he's my dad, and he's the religion, and he's Joseph Smith, and he's Moses. So that part works. And then that crown is central to the book. So there's a faith, and then there's the sonnet crown, and then there's the post-faith. And so I'm going to move past the sonnet crown, because there's probably not a lot of Old Testament stands in the room. I'm going to move into there might be a couple, but I'm going to move into the post-faith. And the third section is kind of like, what do you do when your toolkit is like a kind of conservative religious upbringing, kind of a scrappy conservative religious upbringing, and the Book of Mormon, but now you're like post-faith, married to an alcoholic, and trying to believe marriage. And how do you how do you even navigate the world when your toolkit is like this, So anyhow, so I'm going to read a couple more poems from that, and then you guys can go and have supper with your families. Okay, so this poem is called Hospitality. It's kind of using the story of Lot, and it's sort of exploring how dangerous it can be to tell the story of Lot to a girl child. And it also talks about the Great Salt Lake and the mythology around the seagulls coming in and saving the crops, the Mormon crops, from the grasshoppers that were going to destroy all the Mormon crops from being eaten. But it's really about the perils of hospitality. So this poem is called Hospitality. I bob like a float in the Great Salt Lake unsinkable, where the gulls that once saved my people's crops from a cloud of grasshoppers rise and drop for brine shrimp, shattering the thin crust that lies over the shallows. My father lived by the laws of hospitality. He told me, if the only thing your host has to feed you is a bowl of blood soup, you will eat until the bowl is empty. He said, everything you have you must share with strangers. If you sat beneath the shadow of his roof, he would salt your food from his own salt shaker. Because I am my father's daughter, I opened my door to you, red-faced, hang-dogged, your Peterbilt cap in hand, and I offered what I had, fresh sheets in the spare bedroom, water from the tap, tomatoes so ready they split open on the vine. But what you took was none of those things, baby, and later none of that. What do I mean when I say I am my father's daughter, a thing as necessary and inexpensive as table salt? I never want to rise from this body of water, to feel my weight return to me. Each salinated abrasion received through these guest-host transactions sings a battle hymn, onward, onward, while my heart hardens like a starched brocade because of the way you received without mind or mercy, because of the way I cannot keep myself from looking back.
Christ. Yeah, that's amazing.
And then this other poem is my best effort to get like Mormon artifacts into the way that other people use like Catholic artifacts or Buddhist artifacts, or, you know, everybody's very comfortable reading about them because you see those things in the art world and we're all more familiar with that. So I wanted to try to do that in a poem. And so I'm using like language that is very much part of my family history, but this poem never got picked up by a publisher, so I don't think it necessarily is a very easy thing to do. And the word that I'm using in this poem, this artifact, is called the Liahona, which is a compass that was given to the father of Nephi from the Book of Mormon, so he could travel over the ocean to the Promised Land. And it was like the compass would just say the direction they were supposed to go, so it would just give directions. And the word Liahona, there's this guy named Hugh Nibley. He was like a Mormon apologist, and he was like, Liahona probably means something to do with bees, because in the ancient Egypt, they speculate maybe they used beehives as a compass, but also it could also mean to God the guidance, which there's no linguistic evidence that Liahona means anything, obviously. And so I was raised in this faith where like there's no, I mean, I guess that's all of religion, but there's no like empirical evidence that what I was raised a story has this. So I'm using this thing to navigate post-faith. Anyhow, it's called To God the Guidance. That's what this poem is called. Being married to a drunk is like being a compass in bed with scattered magnets. My intellect honed to a brightness smaller than a pinlight, smaller than fishing line or sewing thread, as small, in fact, as the utmost atom in a needle's point spinning recklessly on its jeweled pivot. I am a well-made, non-functioning thing. Land doesn't exist. Instead, let me arrive at a moment beyond all other moments. Let my vessel be a time machine. Return me to my mouth, my language confounded, the Liahona in my apron pocket, waiting for a message from God, who only ever whispers east, southeast, and south. Rattle the casing, my compass, a box of angry bees, God, its violent thrum. Pray the fondant plug is not consumed until the hive softens to its new queen, that life doesn't end at a honeyless collapse, that a young wife doesn't wander the waters with a wooden box full of dead bees.
She's crazy. I mean, they really are like these poems they just spill out of this book. Every time I was like, okay, that's that poem, I would go to the next poem, and then I'd have to go back and I'd have to read like the last two, to just feel like I had gotten the full context of what was going on again. There's so much happening, and it's so like I can't overstate like the way that you braid all of these things together is just so crazy. And I wish that I could articulate closer like I wish that I could say like, and here's exactly how you're doing it. And I wish that I could ask you like, how exactly are you doing this? But I don't know that it's that simple. Like I think that like like we talked about before, once you live this kind of life, you're just kind of that's it, right? You have this toolkit, you have this understanding of the world that is very singular, and all of a sudden it's like this is how you arrive at these conclusions in your poems, and this is how the poems build together, um and I hate to hear you say like this is my best attempt at this, because it's like they're 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 stunning, like they at the end you're like, okay, like that's huge, and then you have to understand them in the context of the book, and it's like this totally different thing than like it's this totally different thing than anything I've really read before. Um, and it's really just incredible. So I hope you're giving yourself enough credit for that. Uh,
Um, I'm not sure. I mean, I think you're very kind. I think I'm very proud of my book. I want to say I'm very proud of my book. I do think there was like a period of time when I was like 34 that I thought I'd be dead by now. So I think all of this is gravy, Like this is really shocking to me and I'm really proud of it. So yeah, I'm really proud of it. I think I have 100 bad starts for every good poem in the book, like everybody does. And like everybody in the room, I can see like, oh shit, I should have totally, like I should have, oh, I wish like everybody in the room. But yes, I'm very proud of, I think the work is honest, and I think I worked really hard on it, and I'm really glad it happened. And I feel really proud. And I have one more. And I do want to say about this one, I want to tell a story about this one, just a really
please.
quick story. So this poem is like, this is another post-faith, and it was like kind of thinking about like how I had hoped to raise a daughter who was maybe untouched by some of the more difficult parts of being raised in a girl in a faith that was kind of hard on girls. And then one day I was walking with my daughter through a graveyard, and she asked me if Jesus was buried in the graveyard, and I thought, oh my God, I overcorrected. I totally overcorrected. So I was successful, but maybe overcorrected. But she's fine now. She's 20 and she knows the story now. But at the time, I was like, oh geez, I gotta backtrack a little bit. This poem. Oh, and the title of this poem, I heard Eduardo Corral from our program. I heard him say this in a craft talk, and I immediately stole it to be the title of this poem. It's called the original hyperlink was the word. The original hyperlink was the word, and the word was a door that a brother and sister could walk through together and end up in different rooms. They could hold each other's hand, threaded fingers locked at the knuckles, step over the word's threshold and find themselves apart. I say the word door, and you stand before a framed variant of light. You say door, and I find my forehead pressed against particle board inside my first bedroom in Arizona before our father installed the knobs. Eye to the bored out hole, I can see your eye staring back at me. I say I, and you sight down the barrel of a rifle at an empty field from a hunting blind. You find no limit to the stillness there. You say I, and I touch the crepe-like skin of our mother's face. I can feel where her joy multiplies, but not her long aversion to sin. I say sin, but I mean weakness. You hear weakness, and you are standing in your briefs on cold tile while other boys bustle and sweat around you. You aren't sure which part of your body you should cross your arms over. I hear body, and I disconnect like a phone from its cradle. I tell you cradle, and you see me for the first time, decades and decades ago, squalling in pink. The hall light shines through the crib slats and leaves bars made of darkness across my sleeping form. You say the word darkness, and I have arrived at your house before sunrise, newly divorced, and unbundling my 4-year-old out of her car seat. She is round in her winter clothing, milky warm from sleep. I bury my face in her fur-lined hood until the buckle unfastens with a click, but the word doesn't wake her. She hardly even stirs.
Thanks, man.
Yeah,
wild.
thank you all. It was so nice to be with all of you tonight. And thank you so much.
You're so talented. I mean, it's just listening to you read those poems is out of this world. I mean, yeah. Go buy the book. Go buy the book. I don't even need to plug it. Like, you heard it. You heard it here. Go buy it. It's amazing. Yeah.
If you do pick up the book and call me, I'll read you a poem over the phone.
And she's so cool, guys. Like, oh my God. She's so cool. Go find her online. Like, hook it up. She's awesome. This is, yeah. It's always such an honor to do this. Thanks, Allisa. You're the coolest.
Thank you, Kate and Allisa. We do have time for a question or two. Do we have any questions for Allisa in the audience? No? Well, we have been so fortunate to have such an amazing lineup this evening of guests and interviewers. Thank you to everyone who has joined us. So we will wrap up, and we have some announcements. Just a reminder for the Pacific alums out there. We have the MFA alumni reading on Tuesday, February 25th. If you're interested in joining, it's always a good time, and always hear just really amazing writing. Sneaker Wave, which is the Pacific MFA nonfiction magazine, that is a recent publication, is open for submissions to those in the Pacific community. And so that includes folks who have, done a semester, folks who have been part of Body Chronicles, folks who have attended the residency conference. You don't have to have been an enrolled student or graduated. So check out Sneaker Wave. You do need the specific link that was just dropped in the chat. Thank you, Melissa. It is not a link that you can find by searching online. So if you're interested in submitting, check out Sneaker Wave on Substack. Also, we've got AWP coming up in March. Late March in Los Angeles. I know there will be many Pacific folks there. The MFA office will be setting up a table, and there will be some events for Pacific peeps to get together. And so I believe that we will be hearing about some of those events coming up in the near future. Did anyone on the call have that information? Oh, there we go. Melissa, did you want to say anything about that happy hour?
Well, just that we hope to see you all there. Tina and I will be at this Bar Magnolia. It's about a 6-minute walk from the center where the conference is on Thursday afternoon from 5 to 6:30. So it's a big open space with lots of seating, and it'll be a no-host bar. We just hope people drop by and make connections and introduce themselves to each other from the Pacific community, or have a reunion with other folks from Pacific in that space.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. There will be lots happening for anyone who can make it to Southern California. And even if you can't, AWP programming is available in virtual format. And rumor has it that it is in Baltimore next year. So for those of you who are East Coasters, it'll be coming closer to you next year, I believe. Thank you to all of you for coming. There are lots of opportunities for you to read more, view, listen, and engage with your fellow alums and their work. If you haven't visited our Substack, PACT Desk Set, we encourage you to do so. You'll find more conversations there. We do have a new feature there, a couple new features. We've got Notebook. Melissa, did you want to say a little bit about that? That was something that you were part of starting.
Well, just quickly, we're thinking that all of us use our notebooks in different ways. And if you would like to contribute to the notebook page, check it out and see if you'd like to send a prompt or an exercise or something else that developed from your own notebook with a photo. There's a place to submit on Substack, and to kind of get this notebook page going as a resource for all of us to go to and say, oh, I'm not sure, staring at the blank page this morning, what's going to happen, but I know that I can go and look for some resources here. So
Excellent. Thank you. Really excited about that. And I'm also very excited about another new feature, our podcast on the phone. And you can hear Atina and Kate discuss publishing there. It's really a fantastic conversation. So I suggest you check it out. We also have a place for folks to submit to PACT, and whether you have writing that you would like to put out there through the Substack, or whether you have ideas for interviews, please check that out. You can find that on the About page of the PACT Desk Set and scroll down to submissions and click there. Thank you to everyone for being here tonight. This is really exactly what we envision, is all of us coming together just, in community and curiosity with all of our thoughts and ideas on the world, and to share them with folks who think about the same kinds of things that we do. So thank you again for showing up. We will be back in March with our 6th episode, and I hope to see you all there. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.